glad to be joined now with Mitch Hunt. He's a professional rugby player. He's been a part of the New Zealand under-20 team that won the World Championship in 2015. He's also played 7 times for Auckland, 56 times for Tasman, including winning 2 titles with them, 45 games for the Crusaders between 2016 and 2019, and more recently he's become a key part of the Highlanders backline, playing 27 times so far between 2020 and the current day. And it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to have you on, mate.
Awesome, mate. Thanks for having me.
Whereabouts are you now, and what are you doing with your time?
So currently just parked up in Dunedin at the moment. For me, actually pretty lucky. Get probably one of the longest breaks sort of between seasons that I would have had in a long time. So he had a couple of weeks off so far just to sort of relax, sort of get the body and mind sort of right. And I've got about 3 weeks now until I sort of assemble properly with Tasman for the NPC stuff. So huge break for me, but just enjoying actually a bit of downtime, which is great.
Nice. How are you filling in your time? You playing golf? Are you getting out travelling, or how?
Yeah, bit of golf for the most part, mate. To be fair, we've had a little bit of snow and a bit of sort of average weather, so I've been hanging out for the sunny days down here in Dunedin, so I can get out on the course. But that's pretty much been most of it so far. Hopefully, a few more rounds to go yet as well.
Nice. Hopefully, it's not too cold. I know it's winter over there right now.
Yeah, it's freezing at the moment, but the sunny days are, they're not too bad.
So, growing up in Nelson, what were some of your early memories of footy, and what got you hooked?
To be fair, I was a soccer player. Played soccer growing up for the first sort of 5 years at primary school, and I hadn't really had too much of an interest in rugby, just as all my mates in that were playing soccer as well. So just sort of followed along with them, and had a good few years there. I think what sort of got me hooked a little bit was we sort of played some of those sort of inter-school primary tournaments, bit of tackle stuff there. And in soccer, I was sort of like a defender because I was fast. And I know it was only junior, but I was sort of put back as a defender because I was quick, and I sort of wanted a little bit more excitement, I think, out of the sport. And like I say, I was playing a couple of these sort of inter-school tackle tournaments, and sort of really found a little bit of a love for it there, and decided to change over to footy when I was, I think, 11 or 12. So slightly later than potentially most, but I guess that's where it sort of all sort of kicked off for me, yeah.
Nice. Did you have any like role models sort of during this time at school, or who were you sort of looking up to? Was it just soccer players, or were you watching a bit of footy as well?
Yeah, I'm not really too sure. Like even then, like I don't really have memories as such of being really sort of like honed in on sort of like the pro soccer stuff. Like that, I don't really have guys that I don't think I looked up to and stuff like that as such. Obviously in switching to footy, when would that have been? Probably, I don't know, you 10 years old, 11 years old would have been when, the likes of Dan Carter was really coming through his prime. Not to say that he wasn't in the later, but really when he started out and was becoming amazing. So I guess, that initial switch straight into rugby, I was looking at him from the get-go, which was fantastic. So I guess, and a lot of people and a lot of players, their favourite players become guys like Dan Carter, and straight away I was able to see him from when I was sort of chucking the footy boots on.
Did you ever think playing professionally was realistic, or if this was a path that you didn't really consider, what were you intending to go down instead?
Yeah, it's a good question actually. I guess as a younger fella, it was always, that dream of how good would it be to play professional rugby and have that sort of career path as your job. And was always so sport sort of orientated growing up, whether it was, like I say, it was soccer early days. I was really heavily involved with athletics through sort of primary and intermediate high school. Like that was a big focus. Played touch rugby for New Zealand in a couple of teams as well. And I have a huge passion for touch. I think it's great for a rugby player's skills and vision. Huge advocate for touch rugby. I love it to bits. But yeah, so I mean, I'm not really too sure. It was always so sport orientated for me growing up that I feel like there was going to be some sort of sport path involved with whatever I did. Obviously, I got to high school though, and I I wasn't taking the PE classes that I thought I might. I was pretty heavily involved in like the sciences and maths and stuff like that through high school, which is probably a little bit surprising for a rugby player, but I think there was always going to be some form of sport involved with me growing up and what I was going to do. And even at high school there, some form of sort of uni degree as well. So I reckon they would have crossed paths at some stage if I wasn't in the position I am now, for sure.
Nice. So did you end up pursuing higher education? Like I know you moved up to Auckland.
Yep. So so that's again funny for me. I was actually studying physics. There was a few things saying it was engineering, and I know that I was looking at that before I left school, but actually ended up studying physics at Auckland University for about a year and a half, 2 years while I was up there. Unfortunately, though, I think for a degree like that, it's really, really tough to couple with the rugby, and I know a lot of guys when they come into, like you say, that extra study or they're at a university, it does really become tricky to sort of couple the sport and the study stuff at the same time. So I've had to put that on the back burners, but sort of over the last couple of years, I've actually been exploring a few business papers through correspondence, just some stuff on the side to sort of regain a bit of knowledge and understanding about some other things floating around, which I think is good. And there are a few guys floating around in our groups doing the same actually, which is great.
Yeah, that's bloody good. It's always pushed on players to sort of seek education outside of rugby and start thinking of what they want to do post footy. So I'll take you back to your under 20 days. Like what was it like being picked in the side in 2015, and what other players were included in your age group that are still playing professionally today?
Yeah, well, there was sort of a crazy selection time for me because I'd sort of come out of high school and I hadn't been picked in like any of the schoolboy national stuff, and I was pretty gutted about that. Some great players that got selected there, guys like so Damien McKenzie's my year, like Bryn Gatland as well, were guys that themselves and their schools really excelled in the competition. So pretty natural for those guys to sort of get selected out of there. My selection actually came out of Auckland when I was playing for them in sort of the national under-19 tournament at the time. That we managed to get sort of third place in the comp, and I was selected for the camps from there. Again, though, if you look at the guys that were selected, I think there's actually a ton of super players already. We had guys like Akira Ioane. I know Oteri Black. He had played a game for the Hurricanes at that stage and then flew over to Italy where we were playing the under-20s. So there's all these guys playing Super Rugby around me. And if not Super, the majority were already sort of in that NPC frame. So I was sort of feeling pretty privileged to be there, and especially as a number 10, I think, where I sort of shared the 10 jersey and then a bit of fullback as well. But I definitely felt out of place, I think, with the caliber of guys in the group and the coaching staff. I think we had Tana Umanga, Scott Robinson and Leon McDonald. So all guys, fantastic rugby players themselves. The rest of the guys were in sort of this NPC Super, and here's me sort of trying to run the cutter at 10. But it was a great tournament. And obviously I think we were the first team in sort of 4 years from that last group to come out with a win. So yeah, ultimately awesome experience for me and huge learning curves there.
You mentioned that coaching group with Razor and Leon McDonald. Were they key influences in you moving back down south after your time in Auckland?
I think definitely Leon was for sure. At the time, I think Razor was still only coaching Canterbury, but to be fair, he was on I think they had that 6-year run or something crazy in that NPC stage with him, with his titles. But Leon was for sure. I know after that stint in Auckland, and he was the coach of Tasman at the time. He sort of gave me a call and said, "Look, mate, do you want to come home?" Which was awesome because I've got all my family in Nelson for me, which is great. And yeah, he'd given me this call and said, "Look, do you want to come back to Tasman?" They'd heard that Israel Dag at the time had just injured his shoulder in NPC. And they said, "Look, we'll talk to the coaches down at the Crusaders, but we do need an injury cover at fullback as well, if that would help sort of sway your decision." So guys like that, when they had such great careers themselves as players, and they had great success as a coach, it definitely makes it easier to head back to play under someone like that for sure.
Nice, yeah, very much so. So, what was the Crusaders on the radar from the get go, or were you just trying to make a good impression with Tasman?
Yeah, I didn't think, to be fair, that that the super stuff would come sort of as early as it did. I think for Auckland, like you sort of said at the start there, I'd only played 6 or 7 games, and I think only one game was a full 80-minute game. Like the rest were sort of little cameos off the bench and things like that. And so I didn't really think at that stage that a super contract or the potential of one was even so close. And obviously when Leon had given me the call and said, would that interest you? It was like, yeah, absolutely would interest me. So I think I was pretty lucky around that and how that came about so early. But I think, being so young, it was actually great for my development and learning around the coaches they had there as well. So, pretty grateful that it came when it did.
For a lot of listeners who don't know the process, what's the interaction and relationship with like agents, and how do you deal with moving franchises or negotiating contracts? Is there a couple of agents that everyone tends to use, or how does what does that side of things look like?
Yeah, so I think there's probably maybe 2 main agencies in New Zealand for the majority of players. I guess because we don't have, such a huge player pool compared to potentially other sports around the world. And, I could only imagine how many different agencies and people there might be overseas for this sort of stuff in different sports. But I think for the most part, there's sort of 2 agencies in New Zealand, and you'd sort of get linked up pretty young. Usually guys now, or from what I'm sort of hearing, usually guys now are sort of leaving high school into professional, or the potential that they have to end up in a professional environment. Guys are sort of getting linked up pretty early with agents. And it's more just, I suppose, to give direction and help these young guys find their feet in these professional environments early, which is great. I suppose in terms of the changing and adjusting, yeah, I guess it's on me, right, first and foremost, around, am I happy here, or do I want to change? And you sort of have those conversations with the agents. They'll do the digging and all the dirty work for you. So, really when the time comes, it might be conversations with coaches or something that you'll have face to face. But the majority of, in terms of, say, money, contract details, speaking to various, might be managers in teams or coaches in the other teams, and they sort of do all that duty work. And yeah, like I say, once it sort of comes time to have those one-on-one conversations with a coach, coach player, myself and a coach, then that'll sort of all be arranged. So pretty lucky that, we have those sort of services available to us who can do that work and have those sort of guys right on side. It's great.
And what was the turning point or the moment that you wanted to shift down to Dunedin, and what did this look like for you in terms of like a contract scenario playing out, and what actually motivated that move?
Yeah, well, I guess for me, so I was in Christchurch for 4 years, 4 seasons there with the Crusaders, and that was great. Um, Again, fortunate, I think I debuted in my first year being down there, which again, when I first got down, it was like that's not going to happen this year at all. So really, really fortunate that I got to play in that first season. It was awesome. I guess across the next few years, the majority of sort of my time came when Richie Moanga was injured. So he had, I think he broke his jaw at one stage and had another bad injury. But that's sort of where the majority of my time came at the Crusaders, and again in small little stints off the bench. And I guess ultimately was sort of coming into 24 years old and sort of really scraping the barrel for time and playing time. And I actually had a convo about this with someone the other day, and sort of this whole question that I had sort of sitting in the back of my head was, can you foot it in Super Rugby? Can you handle yourself? Can you compete with these guys in Super Rugby? And that was just this question that I just had sort of sitting in the back of my head for probably 6 months or so, I think, leading up to the end of that Crusader contract. And I guess at that time, you could be one of the guys that leaves New Zealand early and heads overseas to play rugby, or I move somewhere else and really give it a good crack. And so for me, I think if I left New Zealand early, that question that I had for the sort of 6 months or so would still have eaten away at me. And I really just wanted to prove to myself, first and foremost, if I could sort of, like I say, hack it, foot it, compete, however you want to put it, in Super Rugby. So hence the sort of shift to the Highlanders. And yeah, it's safe to say that it pretty much got sort of all the playing time and more than I was even expecting. So it's been a great move for me, and definitely one that I wouldn't trade, that's for sure.
What has been the main difference that you've noticed moving from Canterbury down to Dunedin? It could be in terms of like the team culture, the management, or even the facilities that you train and play in.
Yeah, well, I think that was sort of the main one for me was, I mean, across most of the teams, right? Like the cultures they're similar. They have slight differences in the way they do things, but like in terms of the guys, if you're looking at Crusaders and Highlanders, like all the guys are great, and I think when you get to this sort of level, if you're not sort of a good person, or if you're not a great person, you're going to get found out really quickly. And so, if you don't fit the mold of what these teams and organizations are about, you do get put on the back burners pretty quickly. So, in terms of the people and organizations, like they're all really good setups. They have great people running them, because that's that whole term of, that's great people make great rugby players, and that's sort of what both organizations, and I'm sure all of them are sort of built upon. The big one that sort of threw me was actually sort of staff numbers, and like you say, the facilities down in Dunedin. Obviously, the Crusaders have a fully private setup in terms of gym, staffing headquarters. They've got a private field. Even to the point, they've got a private academy gym and set up at the same headquarters too. And I don't know, there might be 50 staff, maybe not quite, up at up in Christchurch at the Crusaders. And I sort of got down here, and the headquarters is pretty small, and I reckon there's maybe 15 staff at the Highlanders. And I'm sort of thinking, like, how does this place run? Like, the Crusaders was huge in terms of all the people, the staff that they had. And here we've got, staff doing the jobs of maybe 5 people in Christchurch, and that sort of blew me away from the get-go around that. We share a gym with the high performance groups in Dunedin, so quite often we're mingling around the gym with there's the netball girls down in Dunedin, the cricket group. There's like track and field athletes, para athletes as well. So we sort of get to mix and mingle with those guys in and around the gym, and obviously we're in the sort of public eye around training fields and stuff too. So those sort of differences were, become apparent pretty quickly. But again, I don't think it ultimately matters, right? It's about the people, and everyone here just sort of gets on with the job when it comes time to work, which is great.
Yeah, for sure. It does sound like more of a grassroots operation.
For sure, yeah.
In many respects. Now, I'm a keen Stags fan and a keen Highlanders fan, and you went from breaking a lot of Highlander fans' hearts with a certain drop goal a couple of years ago. And how have you found like the transition to actually becoming a Highlander? And did it take a while for fans to warm to you?
Yeah, I think that definitely was the case. I get the odd comment about the drop goal, which is quite funny, but to be fair, it's actually sort of been swept under the rug, I think, which is good because, like you're saying, I think a few people were not so happy about that. Yeah, I think it definitely has for people. I think when the fan base and I don't know, the sort of the perception of Canterbury rugby in general, and everyone from sort of outside that region sort of has a tough viewpoint on the Crusaders and Canterbury and in general, and that's all good. But yeah, I don't know. I think me sort of getting down these ways, and it was tough for maybe people to receive at the start. And especially when someone like Josh was already sort of down here and had been down for a couple of years, and at the Highlanders, and that sort of around that number 10 fullback jersey, and he was this guy coming from Christchurch to try and compete and take this jersey, and I don't know, and I guess for me now it was like I sort of said at the start. I think it was about proving to myself around my gameplay first, earning the respect of myself, this little game that I was trying to play, and that's why I moved down to be better as a player. And I think people maybe found that hard at the start, coming down, trying to take this jersey, and I'm not from there originally, and I don't fit, and whatever else that looked. But, I hope now that hopefully through my actions and the way I've played over the last couple of years that, that I am down here to do my best for this region and this team. And I've actually thoroughly enjoyed myself around the group of guys in the organisation. So again, yeah, hopefully my actions sort of hopefully do me a bit of justice, and people are sort of in the van with me now.
Yeah, I think like the evidence speaks for itself, and that you've succeeded in doing that pretty quickly when you came down here. Uh, on the field now, do you have any like pre-match superstitions or like routines that you have to go through? Do you have I don't know, like a lucky pair of jocks, or certain songs that you listen to? How does your pre-match look?
Yeah, I'm pretty relaxed in terms of a lot of that pre-match stuff for me. Like I don't. It's a weird one as well. I don't listen to music pre-game. It's not something that I've sort of really ever got into. I know a ton of guys do, and whether it's pump up music or relaxing music. For me, I'm just I sort of like to just sit around and sort of be really aware around what's going on, and quite often just sort of watching the other guys do their little bits and pieces, and I'm just very relaxed, I feel. No sort of special bits. I think for me, in terms of on field, like maybe what gets me to that sort of state of being so chill or relaxed is just the preparation through the week. I think if you've nailed everything through the week in terms of that build up, that really allows me to be relaxed pre-game and come into those games feeling good. I think if you lack that preparation through the week, you're constantly thinking, you're playing the game before it's happened. You all these scenarios fill into your head because you're not sure. So I think for me, it's nothing special. It really just comes back to the preparation through the week. So come that back end, I'm just really relaxed and sort of ready to go.
What does that preparation look like? Let's say the back line has to prepare for a new opponent, on a weekly basis. Who
Yep.
takes charge of this? And let's say you're playing the Hurricanes on Saturday.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different sort of moving parts to that. If we say specifically the back line, we sort of had a couple of coaches and sort of Tony Brown, Ricky Flutie as well, who was helping us out in terms of team attack and back skill too. And then sort of once Brownie had left for Japan duty, we had another guy, Kane, pop in. So where, say, for instance, we had Ricky Flutie, who would take sort of the attack side of the back line in terms of scrum strikes, what we're doing there. Just say, for example, that was there. Then we had Kane, who was doing purely defensive stuff. And so we come in early in the week for meetings. I'd link up with, say, Ricky around some of the scrum strikes that we'd use. The laptops become available like this. So we're watching clips and film through the week, understanding what their defensive pictures would look like. So the guys are all sort of looking at the film early in the week. Here's our opportunities around that. And then on the flip side of that, Kane would come in and show us their strikes. So from a defensive perspective, we're really aware of what they might throw at us as well. So that's sort of how that might look through the week. Early on, it's filled with a ton of information. So we see both sides. The boys are on the computers. As we get through later in the week, because we've done that work, now it's just about doing it. So when we get out in the field, we're fast, we're sharp, we're straight into things, and it's sort of that whole thing around we're just going off instinct then, and we're not thinking because that thinking's been done sort of early on.
Is it quite a collaborative process? Like, do you voice and hear a lot of the opinions from the players, or is it mainly from an analyst and coaching point of view?
I'd say the majority is from sort of the coaching group. Obviously, we had a lot of experienced guys in and around the group. So what became really good was actually lots of conversation about it. So it wasn't sort of all the players saying, let's do this and do that. Because you could go around in bloody circles for hours, I reckon, with all the, getting all the nitty gritty out of it. But so the majority comes from sort of the coaching group and what they've seen. And then obviously there is the conversations from players because we're the ones out there doing it. We're the ones out there with the feeling, hey, this doesn't feel quite right. We have a conversation about it. We might adjust some things. So there is that aspect, which I think is important because like I say, as players, when we're out there feeling it, if it doesn't feel right, it's no point from an analyst perspective, say when they're not out there doing it. So it is collaborative, but I'd say the majority from the coaches for sure.
How far off do you think the Landers were from the Blues in the final, and what specific areas were you looking to exploit as a team going into that match in particular?
Yeah, that one hurts a lot, when you are so close from the title, and what a sort of crazy sort of roller coaster year we'd had, and some good wins, some poor ones at the start, and it definitely hurts the most when you are so close at the final hurdle. In terms of sort of focus areas, I guess for them, right, like they're such a huge team in general, big guys, big power athlete guys, and just big frames. So a lot for us was around our kicking game and our kicking strategy. We thought that if we could keep the ball in front of our forwards a lot of the time, so anytime there wasn't much momentum in the match or things weren't favouring us, we'd look to kick the ball and have our guys coming forward a lot. even to the point where, say, our counter-attack plan in terms of running the ball back actually became about kicking, because again, it kept the ball in front of our guys, trying to save energy for us and shift their big guys around. And that really became sort of the crux of our game plan for that match, was trying to shift and tire out. I think shortly in that second half, we saw, and our game plan wasn't going to work in the first necessarily 10, 20 minutes. It was going to be something that was a grind away, and we saw results later. And I think in that second half there, maybe about midway through, I sort of felt a bit of that momentum shift. We started playing with the ball. We were getting penalties and sort of shifting back down into the half, which is what we're after. I guess ultimately those games do come down to tiny bits of moments, little wee moments, and unfortunately, like a couple of penalties there. They got late in the game. We had the lead with 9 minutes to go, and unfortunately, a penalty put them back up, which again at that stage was a momentum swing. And then really unfortunately with their last try, and it sort of broke that game away and really put that pressure on us with 3 or 4 minutes to go to make something happen. So yeah, I guess in those sort of games and in those finals, those small little things like a penalty or momentum shifts become huge in the final sort of outcome. Yeah.
Let's talk about kicking some more. How do you go about sharing and allocating those duties at the Highlanders? And is your leadership taken into consideration? For example, does Josh do a lot of the penalty kicks to touch while you can sort of talk to the back line? Or does someone do the place kicking and someone does the tactical kicking? Or is it just purely luck, like whoever's got the ball?
No, yeah, well, it's not something that's talked about a bit. Like as kickers and stuff, we end up in, just funny, and we end up in sort of like grey patches every now and then, and you might have a tough few weeks of kicking, say, and just doesn't feel right, and things aren't going right in terms of the kicking and that. So it might be like one week I'm like, look, man, I'm in a hole at the moment. I know I was in a wee patch through the middle of the start of the year a little bit, and Josh was doing a lot of the goal kicking, and I was doing a lot of the punting stuff and sort of the dropout stuff, and it sort of rotates and comes back and forward. But quite often, in terms of what you're saying there, though, around if someone's kicking, there will be messages and guys that are taking leadership roles around that team at that stage, and quite often during those periods, we'll actually be getting messages from sort of the coaching box. Say, for example, if Josh was kicking, I might get a little whisper in my ear from the trainer around some attack stuff, and so that's messages for me to feed into the group. And I guess it's a good chance for guys to connect while those kicks are happening. But yeah, again, it's on. I suppose you're always thinking about the team in those times and like I say there, it's really who's performing well. I'm not going to try and goal kick if I'm not at my best and Josh is kicking really well. It's like, man, you take it because that's best for the team, So little bit around that side of things, and it comes and goes as well. So we do rotate a bit.
Take me through your goal kicking routine and what goes through your head. Can you hear the crowd for this process, or are you zoned into what you're doing? And is there ever a time when, let's say, like in the warm up to a match, when you're kicking them absolutely pure, and then in the actual match it just turns around, or vice versa?
Yeah, so I guess my kicking stuff again comes back to really relaxed and chilled out. And then I think the back end of this year, I've actually learned a few things around my kick and my style. And it's funny because it's like, I've been doing the same sort of kick style for like 4 or 5 years, and even now I'm still learning little tweaks and little bits to be better. And for me, like I say, so much of my kicks around feel and feeling good. Big thing for me is timing, and I understand that all kickers are timing and because it's important. But for me, because I'm such a side-on kicker and I'm not a big distance kicker, that the whole accuracy and timing thing becomes hugely important. So for me, again, it's just really slow. It's chilled out, but it's about that timing in terms of the general kick. And for success there. In terms of the crowd and that, you do hear them. I tend to take notice of it because if you try and fully block it out and you're zoned in and it gets through, then that's when it stuffs you. So for me, I actually like to sort of acknowledge the crowd and the noise. And that might be as I'm setting the ball up, sort of I'm taking my steps back, I'm sort of getting my alignment for the posts. But around that time, I actually will sort of acknowledge the crowd. And there's a point where if anyone was ever watching, where I'll actually sort of have a big breath, and then that's sort of my block out from there. Because like I say, if I feel like if you get to this zone and then you let the crowd come in and you acknowledge or affect you there, that's when you can be sort of chucked off your focuses. So acknowledge it at the start and then wipe it towards the end of that kick. Yeah.
What's the maximum distance that you are comfortable with before you change kickers? Let's say it's like 40 to 45 meters out from not quite in front, but it's to get ahead in the match. Who makes that call as to who kicks it?
I guess it's always right. So maybe a distance for me, and again now because I've really slowed things down, which means again for me maybe a little bit less distance. So I think somewhere around that 45 zone for me would probably now be that sort of maximum range. I guess it's always like we'd always sort of set as kickers in that, like, you're never going to take a kick that you can't get, you know what I mean? You're not going to go, yeah, I'm going to try and bang this and be 5 short. Like, it's just, you're not going to do that, and you got to be real with yourself. So I think, for example, in the final, there was a kick sort of sitting on the sort of 45-meter zone, and there was a slight head sort of wind. And I'd said to Aaron, obviously it was captain Aaron, look, I was like, it's not for me. In terms of finals, just the scoreboard pressure and kicks are huge. So that's when I sort of pointed over to Josh and said, can you hit this, mate? And so for having those sort of moments where I do have him there to go, can you, and stepped up and kicked it. So I guess, like I say, I'm not going to go out and kick something that I know that I can't kick. And if Aaron gives it the thumbs up, maybe I'll give a wee point to Josh, and he's like, yep, I can hit that. So we have that little bit of sort of relationship there too around sort of that kicking from around those sort of further distances.
Nice. Let's talk about the Trans-Tasman competition for a little bit. After playing, what seemed to be New Zealand team after New Zealand team for months, what was the adjustment like when you started playing these Australian teams in terms of pace and skill level?
I guess for the Trans-Tasman, like, it was actually really refreshing coming into this comp, because, like you say, like, last 2 years we just played New Zealand teams, and our pre-season games are against New Zealand teams, and at the end of it, you've played the Crusaders like 4 times in the calendar year, and it's like, I know the first 5, I know the fullbacks, I know the wingers, I know the forwards, I know the game plan's similar, and so it's, by the time that comes around, you've done the same sort of preview stuff on these guys. And where the Trans-Tasman stuff was great was like, hang on, there's actually a lot of new guys that I haven't played before. I remember playing against these guys, but I've actually got to go and do all this homework again because, it's been so long since we'd played. So that aspect was really refreshing. Seeing you guys and looking up all these new film bits to do homework on, which was great. In terms of the games, though, yeah, around like the intensities and that, you never sort of knew what they were truly going to be like until we're out there playing. Like I know in that Reds game for our round one of Trans-Tasman, they, I was actually surprised, and not being disrespectful or anything, but I thought the D was going to be a lot more aggressive than it was. And again, that was just something that you didn't find out until you're actually out there. Then you go for, say, the game against the Force, and we're like, okay, these guys were sort of successful in their own comp, but that was actually probably one of our toughest games. They were just a gritty side who hung in there for 80 minutes, and that was actually a really physical game. And so, like I say, you just didn't know until you really got out there what the intensity was going to be like, that speed and pace. Were they going to fall over early or stick in there late? So exciting games for sure to play, and hopefully we get to do that sort of again next year.
Yeah, like I know that there was a lot of commentary before the competition started around their new style of play. Do you think that this was an agenda that they've really pushed on the franchises? And did you notice an obvious change in play this year?
I don't know. Like out there, it didn't sort of feel like, in terms of playing on the field in the moment, it didn't feel like there was sort of any special game plan out of the ordinary. But in watching, say, the other Aussie teams play the other New Zealand teams, it did sort of look like they were trying to hold the ball a little bit more in terms of running, like a lot of play out of their own halves and that. And I don't know if that was just the specific teams or, like you say, if that was a change put on, but I think they do have some potential, those Aussie teams. Like we say, we did have a couple of battles in our Brumbies game and the Force game. They ended up having a few wins, and yeah, although they didn't have probably the successes they want as sort of the Aussie Union and that, I think they definitely have some potential for some good rugby going forward. And I think that comp would have done wonders for them in terms of seeing that standard of where they have to get to. And it's definitely in them. It's just going to be about getting, more games like that in, and hopefully next year we see a lot more of that too.
Collectively, do you think the Wallabies are going to be a competitive outfit, or do you think the All Blacks have just got a too good of a team right now?
Yeah, again, that's I don't really, you don't know how to sort of comment on that. To be fair, it's one of those things where, like you say, there are some great Aussie players in those groups, and collectively they might just be fantastic as a group. I don't think it's probably fair to reflect the sort of Trans-Tasman as a whole on the one Wallaby team. I think there's some awesome players in there. And I still think they're going to be competitive. But then, in saying that, the All Blacks, I think at the moment, they've got some unbelievable talent floating through in that group as well. And, obviously looking at their game last night, again, it's not reflective, but the skill level is incredible in that group. So it's going to be really exciting to see Aussie All Black games in the next few months.
Let's talk about defense for a bit. So, like during the early stages of a match, how consciously aware are you of the opposition playing style? And if it's different to what you guys prepared for, how hard is it to then get everyone on the same page and adjust your strategy on the fly?
It's a good question. For the most part, though, like it would be pretty rare for a team to sort of come out with something or an attack so left field that you hadn't sort of slightly prepared for it. Like for an example, maybe the one thing that got us this year was we played the Hurricanes early on in the Aotearoa comp, and they were sort of throwing like this funny cut set up and hitting inside balls to sort of Geordie Barrett running on the inside of rucks. And again, that was a picture this is probably an example of that, say, where that wasn't actually something that we'd even considered. I don't think they'd shown it. And they scored 2 tries against us with it. And that sort of throws you as a group where it's like, we hadn't prepared for this. It wasn't even spoken about because we weren't aware. So that's when those sort of moments in the game, we're sort of talking about say the goal kicks and that, where a chance to connect as a group becomes hugely important. Because if they've just scored 2 tries, they're going to keep coming there because it's working. So those little moments of being able to connect, have those messages come down, or the defensive leaders in the group get those messages out so we can try and adjust, because like you say, if you don't, they keep coming there because it's successful and then they keep scoring. So
Let's talk about sort of running the cutter and like defending on your own line. One of the most memorable moments from a fan's point of view this year was when Ethan Blackadder came off the back of a line out. It was you guys were defending on your own line in Dunedin, and Scott Gregory just stopped him on his tracks. Yeah. It was like a huge moment in that match for a lot of fans that I was watching it with anyway.
Yeah.
Is there any particular player that defending as a first five that you are like, you're not necessarily scared of, but you're like, shit, if he starts running a cutter towards me, I'm going to have a tough time bringing him down?
Oh, yeah. I had this a wee while ago as well, which is great. And I know a few players have said this guy, but obviously Nani Laumapi, same thing. You're not, you're never scared of people, but I've just always struggled to work out how to tackle them. And I've had times where I've gone low, like around the knees, and I've been smoked, and you go high and you go, right, I'm going to try and wrap the ball up, and you still get smoked. And it's just, he would be roughly, I reckon, my height. So sort of $1.74 m, $1.75 m, but obviously he's like 105 clicks.
Built
Huge,
like a brick.
just like you can't get a good wrap. He's so powerful. He's he's actually really, really fast as well. And you just sort of don't realize that until you're out there next to him. Like, geez, this guy's quick too, powerful. So the whole combination of that, and you're just like, I reckon, yeah, I've had I had a few run-ins, but just issues trying to deal with him on the field. And he's always one that it's like, I actually get excited for it, which is great, but it's like, this is going to be a good challenge. And more often than not, though, to be fair, he sort of comes off best. Makes him look silly.
Nice. So my particular favorite performance of yours, from a fan's point of view, was this year's victory over the Crusaders away in Christchurch. I believe the leadership and skills that you displayed on that day were pretty comprehensive in the Highlanders getting that win. How hard is it playing the Crusaders at home, and what separates them from different sides? What do you guys get right on that occasion?
Yeah, slightly tricky. It's a weird one, because it's Crusaders ended up, I think it was actually while I was there, and they had this run of I want to say in the 30s, potentially, 30 games at home unbeaten. And just, it became this aura for the team. And I know, while I was there, it was and it was that fear of losing. I think when we were there, it was you didn't want to be the team after this huge record to lose a game at home. It was something ridiculous anyway in terms of home wins. And then I guess that filters through to the rest of the comp, right? Now they know that the Crusaders have this huge winning streak at home, and they become this sort of fortress for them there in Christchurch. And that's just, I guess, low-key in the back of your head becomes this little mental game of we can't beat them there, right? We're not supposed to beat them there. And that was this whole thing for so long with them. And I guess, though, the Hurricanes beat them at home earlier on in that season, and then it's well, it is possible, right? I think in terms of that game specifically, our big guys, we fronted up defensively incredibly well. That was one thing that stood out hugely, was the defensive effort from everyone, which helps. We actually took points to build a scoreboard pressure, which potentially we hadn't done necessarily, but again, the Crusaders set pieces is a force. So being able to actually put I think we put maybe 3 early penalties on them there, and then we scored, and so that creates that chasing pressure and scoreboard pressure on the team as well. Added a few more penalties late in the game, and that score just creeps up. And I guess ultimately where maybe that last 20 minutes or so, they're fully chasing the game. We've had a great defensive night, so we're sitting really comfortably there, and they're trying to play out of their 22, and it's getting greasy, and just that whole sort of combination, I think, of a great night. But you get instances like Scotty Gregory's tackle, little moments like that, I sort of talking about before in the final, but little moments just sort of build the group up as well. And I think it was the sort of the biggest win a Landers side has had over the Crusaders ever. So yeah, awesome night to be a part of, that's for sure.
Yeah, it must feel strange to be someone that has both broken Highlander supporters' hearts, but also made their day on the same ground, but playing different teams.
I guess it's crazy when you look at it like that. Yeah, I hadn't sort of thought about that, but good to get a little bit of justice back, for the Landers fans.
Yeah, talk to me about the 2019 Mitre 10 Cup campaign. Like, how special was that for the Tasman side, and then to back it up again in 2020? You started all 12 games, and you almost scored 100 points in 2020. How special was that?
Yeah, awesome couple of years with the group, and that 2019, I think for me, will still probably sit as a career highlight at the top. I guess being from the region and being a part of winning that first title, we sort of spoke about that as maybe not quite as a group, but I know I've talked about to a few guys around, like, our names are going to be there forever as that first title for Tasman. And I think that's something really special. And I guess with our group and the culture there, and that, like, Tasman's so young that, say compared to like a Canterbury or an Auckland, like they're such old clubs that you never can quite connect with, say, the history as well as maybe we can, because, like I say, because it's so young, we actually grew up watching the first Tasman team, and I've played with some great Tasman guys that are actually part of the building of the club, if you like. I know early on that the Tasman teams at the start just used to get smashed. They were just getting smashed week in, week out. They were fighting for relegation to be dropped. They nearly went broke, and the club nearly went under. And so, like, we were able to see all this history sort of unfold around us growing up. So we saw the struggles, we saw it be built, and then we got to be part of trying to sort of aid to that legacy. And I think that's what made that 2019 year so great. The fact it was unbeaten as well. I actually forgot about that until the other day, and someone had said that it was an unbeaten year, and you're like, yeah, it was. So even things like that as well just make it even more sweeter.
Did you guys get the shield?
No, so that's the one thing in our Tassie group that we actually haven't had a chance. I think Tasman's only ever had one challenge at it a few years back, and none of this current group has even had a look at it with Tasman. So I think if all the stars aligned for this upcoming season and Hawke's Bay hold the shield till round 10, then we'll get a challenge then. It's done a bit of moving the last couple of years, and been a few weeks here and a few weeks there. So who knows? Fingers crossed for maybe a round 10 challenge, because that would be pretty special to have on the I guess on the CV as well.
Yeah, the celebration looks pretty special when it does happen.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the next level. Like, how collaborative and straightforward are the All Blacks coaches with the franchises that you've been involved with, and have they personally given you any directive on what to work on or what to strive on in the future?
Not really, to be fair. For the majority, I think, like, you won't hear anything until you're selected, for the most part. And I guess that just it's you and you, and you've got to find ways to work hard and get better on your own. And I think we can see from there was actually a lot of video stuff out of in terms of the most recent All Black selection, where so like my old mate Finn Christie they're at the pub having a couple of beers, and as a group of them, and they were watching this selection live. He had no idea that he was about to be selected, and maybe you sort of have an inkling, I'm getting close, or some of those guys. But again, I think for the majority, you really don't get a lot of communication unless you are selected. I guess at that stage, though, if you are in the All Blacks camp, there would be a lot of talk back and forward around your season, areas to be better, a lot of catch-ups. But say, for example, in terms of me, you wouldn't hear unless you actually make the group. So I guess it's just about head down and keep working hard, really.
Do you view your short to medium term future with the Highlanders, and what would incentivise you to shift elsewhere?
No, I'm still here for another year at the least. So I think now, like, I wouldn't see shifting to another New Zealand franchise wouldn't be on the cards at all. Really, really enjoyed my time down with the Highlanders group, and I think for me, maybe potentially what's made it so enjoyable is actually getting to sort of learn this whole new game plan. A lot of different stuff around kicking and game plan, fresh faces, and that's, I think, maybe why I've really enjoyed my time here as well, and obviously playing a lot, which has been great. So I'm going to stick around here for a little bit longer, and I hope we can try and go better and maybe add a title to it next year would be pretty cool.
Yeah, we don't want anything more other than
would be great.
It must be pretty exciting as a player, though, to look on the distant horizon and think that overseas might be an option. What does this process look like for someone who's not aware? And is it quite complicated in trying to find like different agents, or are you leaning on players who are already overseas?
Well, I think especially now, like, that's actually quite key. I think you do know, as you sort of get older, you do know a few more guys that are overseas in different spots, and you talk to guys who have come back about their experience and that. So I think that's a big part of it for sure. In terms of the agents, like, I think most of the New Zealand agents probably just stick to sort of the New Zealand rugby. There'll be a couple of the bigger agents who they have a lot of contacts overseas and guys over there. So it's actually a lot of sort of back and forward between there. I guess as a player, it sort of potentially depends on what sort of rugby you're after as well. I know from what I understand, like the European years are really long. It's 30 season game, games in those seasons, and it's tough rugby as well, and it maybe depends on the weather. Like, you hear a lot of stuff out of Scotland, and the weather can potentially be not so flash. So it's like, we don't want to go there, and what stage of the career am I at? Do I want to play rugby? Do I want to still get better, or am I right at the end of my career and maybe going to enjoy something a little bit more? I see that the league in America is starting to grow now, and there'd be some great experiences had over there, I could imagine. So, things like that you've got to weigh up, and Japan, you hear a lot of good things out of too. And I guess it's on the player and maybe what stage of the career they're sort of sitting at.
Awesome. Well, I'm not going to take up any more of your time, but I really appreciate the time and coming on and having a chat, and I appreciate the work that you're doing with the Highlanders. I wish you all the best for the Tasman NPC competition, and yeah, thanks again.
Awesome, man. Thanks for having me.